Welcome back. Today we are talking with David Young, and for segment two, we are going to talk about multi-discipline and metrics-driven risk assessments. David, what kind of risk assessments are we talking about?
Well, I always talk about things in phases. So I always say crawl, walk, run, right? So when I came to Panasonic to build a BCP program, EM program from the ground up, you have to start in the crawl phase. So you're doing risk assessments from my single lens, right? And I've got a big background, a lot of experience, so I can pretty comprehensively look at a lot of risks that are going to be presented to a company. And I have BC people, our skill is that we're a generalist. We have a broad understanding of a lot of things. And so we're able to sort of assess things from a very broad 30,000 foot view and look down. But as you mature as a company, and where we're trying to go with Panasonic is um, there's a lot of business entities that have a stake in the risk assessment game. And there's a lot of specialties that have a unique lens through which they can view risks and see risks that might be blind to other business units. So having a more collaborative methodology to present risks, look at them through a multidiscipline approach, rate and categorize those risks, and then have a multidiscipline mitigation strategy put together that can be presented to leadership. That's what we're really going for. And so you want to have like a risk council is what we have, and it's made up of 8 critical business units that all have a stake in this risk: physical security, cybersecurity, EMBC, finance, legal, quality, and employee health and safety, right? And so the concept being that a risk like an earthquake, I have a very metric driven rubric for scoring that risk across a bunch of criteria. And what I will do as a BC person is I will look at that earthquake risk and score it from a BC perspective. And finance will do the same thing from their perspective. And EH&S will do their same thing from their perspective, right? And when you get to the end, you average those out. And then you get a score, a very granular score, 7.12, right? And then that on your risk registry, that rack and stacks that risk. What's great about that is that when you go to the senior leadership, like maybe on a quarterly basis, right? Because what the senior leaders at Panasonic struggle with right now, and why I'm pushing this risk council concept to them, and they've really bought into it, is because cyber is coming to them and going, "Hey, the sky is falling over here, and next week I'm coming, and next week EM's coming," and they're getting ping ponged around with the sky is falling from all these different business units. Instead, now we'll come to them on a quarterly basis and go, here are the alligators closest to the boat, and here's why. And they'll know that the metrics that are driven by what they've said is important to them, right, are weighted in that direction. It's been looked at by 8 of the business units. They pay the money to understand and assess these risks, and the risk is coming to them comprehensive, as opposed to them coming back to me and saying, well, what does employee health and safety say? Did you run this by quality? Right? No, they know that all these people have looked at it. So that's a big piece.
Is that the multidisciplinary approach you talk about? Is bringing all these different people together? And what
Yes.
happens if they do have extreme differences? Health and safety says that's a 10 out of 10. And another group goes, barely registers with me. How do you manage that?
Well, that's going to happen, right? And that's sort of like the concept, right? So let's do an example of maybe a financial risk, right? It's not going to have a big life safety component. It's not going to have, all this other stuff. So the scores are going to be different, but that's what we want. We want that holistic view, right? Um, Also, by having very well-defined thresholds of what a major and a minor risk is, and then categorizing it by strategic, financial, things like that, um, that helps to understand where the risk sits and how important it is, along with that score. Additionally, by having that 8 member council, there the other person that's on it, who's the sort of uh, board director for the council, is the vice president of security and resilience. He's the deciding vote. So if a risk gets presented to the council, 4 of us are like, that's not really a thing, and the other 4 are like, that's really a thing. then he gets to cast that deciding vote. And does it go on the risk registry, and where does it go, major or minor? The thresholds for like major, I'll just throw a number out there. If it's going to cost us more than $10 million, it's a major. Less than that, it's a minor. Minors will sit further down and be mostly managed by the individual business unit. Major risks will be handled holistically by the risk council. If it's a financial risk, we're probably going to assign the POC to finance, our finance member. Now they can utilize the rest of the team members to create a mitigation strategy, but they're going to own that one and run it to completion. What's great about the metric driven approach too is you can have the continual improvement, right? So when I score, there's a portion of the scoring rubric where I say mitigations implemented. So let's say my average score for business continuity is 14.8. But I know that I've put plans in place. I have good comm strategy. I've leveraged Everbridge. We're ready to move on this, and we know what we're going to do. And we've actually done it once or twice in practice, so we know we can do it. So I maybe say I believe I've applied 40% mitigation to this risk from a business continuity perspective. Well, that then drops my score to maybe 10.2, right? And so then I present that, we do mitigation. What the other piece that's really nice too is once you've honed this in, the way you return value to the company, one of the ways you return value to the company or show that return on investment is you're able to then you have a really honed in metric driven analysis of the risk and the potential financial impact. And you're able to then go to your insurance providers and get a much more tailored package. So instead of having a $40 million cybersecurity insurance package, if you know you've done all the work, you've got switched data center, disaster recovery plans, failover systems, virtual environments, you know you've done all this work, you've spent $3 million on this, and now you know you're pretty tough against this threat. Now you can go back and say, well, I think I mitigated about 65% of this. So I don't need a $40 million package anymore. I need an 18 or a 12, $16 million package. And that insurance savings year on year on year is that return on value to that initial spend that you did. So that's how you can show that to the leadership.
You got me thinking about change. How does change affect these risk scores? Because over time, sometimes something that may have been scored low increases. So do you do a periodic review, monthly, every 6 months, annually? Look at all these risks, and then what kind of risks should we be looking at all the time?
So you're absolutely right. So that crawl, walk, run, right? The walk phase is semi-annual reevaluation of the entire risk registry. And the way I'm really pushing to do that is to build the scoring criteria and that algorithm and everything into a workflow, into a risk management platform where it's very automated. So each risk council member, when a new risk makes it on the risk registry, automatically all risk council members will get this digital, they just go on and click 5, 2, 4, 5, 3. They score everything out, hit enter, boom, mission complete. That stuff goes back in and we do it. So that's that evaluation piece. It has to be continuous. And because the risk council will meet every month, it provides an opportunity. And in the way the charter's written, the policy's written, is that if there's an emerging risk, we can form up the council ad hoc anytime. But we're always meeting every month so that these new emerging risks can make it into our consciousness of the entire risk council. And then long term, my goal when we get to that run phase is start to incorporate more. Once we have this really good sight picture of all of our risks, start leveraging technology, AI, machine learning to then help monitor those risks. Like say, hey, AI, I have this company, we do this thing, and I have this particular risk that I'm concerned about. Here's all the details and the factors, yada, yada. Can you monitor these sources and other sources to on a daily basis, give me a synopsis of things that might be emerging out in the global threat hemisphere that might impact this risk. That's where I want to get to.
Oh, so you're not doing that now, but that's where you want to get to. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, that's that run phase. We're not at the run phase yet.
Okay. How do you go about, if you are identifying new risks? I'm assuming anyone on the council or anyone in the organization should be able to identify something, right?
Yeah,
Bring
absolutely.
something forward, like, hey, I've just heard about something that happened to maybe a competitor. And this kind of goes back to our first segment. using someone, this is terrible to say, but using someone else's disaster or the risk that they're experiencing as a competitive advantage for yourself.
Yeah, a learning opportunity, right? So we say in the military, our 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 technical orders are how we do things. They're written in blood, typically because if there's something that's been written down that you're supposed to do, turn this nut to 28.6 pounds per square inch of pressure on this jet, it's because somebody didn't do that. A panel flew off and we lost a pilot, right? So most everything that's written is because it's written in blood. We learned a hard lesson that if you don't do this way, people get hurt. And so you can use those things that occur like with the most recent, right? There was a Korean EV cell manufacturer in South Korea that had a like only 5,000 cells. That's not very much. I mean, 5,000 isn't even half a pallet for us. And that caught fire. It killed 23 people and burned the whole place down because those lithium ion battery fires are significant. They're very challenging to manage. And so I was out immediately. I've got, of course, I've got my Google thing set up to alert me to anything in my sphere going on anytime. And I'm immediately digging in and looking at what did they do wrong? Well, how did that go? How fast did it happen? I'm trying to gather details to go, okay, I really want to understand what that could look like for us. And then that helps reframe those risk discussions and provides more context. You want that. That's really that data-driven approach, is being able to go empirically. There have been 7 EV battery manufacturing fires over the last decade, right? And they've typically cost this much in damage, this much in shutdown, right? So I can have so I'm not just going like, I think it's going to be 3 days of shutdown. No, I know better because I've seen it occur in the past. So
How do you determine what risks go up to the executive level? Because as you've described, many can come forward and your risk council does their scoring. But how do you determine what goes up to executives? Because I assume you can't show up with just reams and reams and reams of risk. So how do you
no.
determine what they should see and pay attention
Well, what's so great about that scoring methodology, right, is that in the end you get a aggregated average score of that risk, but based on all those entities looking at it. And as a new risk gets put on, it gets scored. And if number 3 is 7.4 on the risk scale, and the new thing goes on at 7.6, well, it becomes the new number 3, right?
to?
And what I'm really doing when I walk into the executives is I'm usually presenting 3 risks at a time. And I'm usually going to them and going, these are the 3 alligators closest to the boat, because I can do that in 6 to 8 minute blocks for each risk, explain to them the background, the history, the empirical evidence, what the cost is going to be, how I see it shaking out, and really painting a picture and a scenario of a story, right? To them, and going, here's what I believe is the best strategy, and here's how much it's going to cost and why it's going to work. And then we move on. They go, I agree. He's the executive champion. What's the next one, right? So I do that. I get the 3 risks, whatever the alligators are close to the boat. And a big part of that is which of those alligators close to the boat are currently completely unmitigated. Those are the ones I'm really looking at. And the other criteria I use, and I think this is really important for anyone in this field, is it's um it's not just where companies or where any organization tends to fall down during a crisis, is that it's not just the impact of the event, and it's not just there's another factor, what I call NDT, no decision time. So where most companies fail is if the type of risk doesn't happen very often, right? And and uh and it's impact it's so let's say, I'm trying to explain this in a smart way. So if it happens all the time, your company usually knows how to handle it. If you have 18 power disruptions a year, you know how to do it. But if you never have one, then that's a risk. Those are scarier things that don't happen all that often, because you don't really aren't your muscle memory isn't there to take care of it. Then if you look at the um the the likelihood or whatever kind of that occurring, uh you know if it oh man, I'm really struggling to kind of frame this, but really the point is the no decision time piece, right? So if it's something that doesn't happen very often, if it's a hurricane, right, you might have 3 days or 4 days of prepared knowledge. It's when it's something that's very impactful that doesn't really happen in your organization very long, and you have no time to make decisions during the crisis. That's when when things usually go badly and fall down. So I'm looking for those particular risks that have no decision time and aren't mitigated, and those are the ones I present to the senior leadership. And then the goal is to come back to them 3 to 6 months later and go, all right, remember those 3 risks I told you about? Here's all the work we've done. Here's where they sit now. And here's your next 3 risks that I tell you you need to keep that should be keeping you up in bed at night. And I also then, and on top of that, I have a nice, really visual risk assessment matrix with all the risks sitting where they are, and I'm constantly adjusting those. So I show them a snapshot of what it looked like last time I presented to them, the things that are in the red, and what it looks like now, and how those have dropped down, and how more things are in the green or yellow.
Oh, interesting. Well, we've come to the end of our second segment. We're talking with David Young today, and we were talking about metrics-driven risk assessments, and we will be right back. If you like that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.